You've been under a spell for longer than you realize. Not a magician's kind of spell, not some dramatic snapping of fingers and barking like a dog on stage. No, this is deeper. A subtle hypnosis that's been running since the moment you were told your name. Since the moment someone pointed at you and said, "That's who you are," you started believing you were just that, just the name, the story, the skin, the memories. A timeline wrapped up in roles and expectations. A person with preferences and habits, a past and a future. You carried it all like a suitcase you never packed yourself, and no one told you to ask, what if none of this is truly mine? Because the truth is, you've been dreaming. A waking dream where you mistake thoughts for reality, identity for essence, and struggle for necessity. Most people don't even question it. They live like characters trying to solve a plot that was never theirs to begin with. They chase comfort, success, safety, as if those things will finally reveal the truth. But that truth, the one we're all chasing, isn't out there waiting to be discovered. It's been here the whole time. You just haven't noticed yet. You don't have to go looking for enlightenment. You're already there. But the light is dim behind all that noise. You've been tangled in a story about being a separate self, someone who needs to achieve, fix, heal, improve, prove. Someone who is always slightly broken, always just one insight away from being whole. But what if none of that someone is real the way you've been taught? Waking up isn't about transformation. It's not about becoming a better you. It's about seeing clearly, seeing what was always true before the story got layered on top. When you wake up, you don't become something new. You just stop pretending. Everything you were ever told you had to search for peace, love, happiness, it's already here. Not in the form of some fantasy paradise. Not in a version of life where everything is perfect, but in the quiet, steady presence underneath everything else. That's what you are. You've looked around and felt the chaos, the tension, the pain of the world. You've seen war, division, heartbreak. And yes, it's all real in one sense. But beneath that surface is something you may have forgotten, an unshakable stillness. Peace without a reason, love that doesn't ask for anything, joy that doesn't depend on a win. How can both things be true? Because the surface is noise, and most people live entirely in that noise, never questioning the signal beneath it. This isn't about denying the pain of the world. It's about waking up from the trance that says that's all there is. There's an ancient word for this illusion, Maya. A dream, a veil, a performance so convincing that you forget you were ever the actor beneath the mask. It's a story that tells you you're someone small, someone separate, someone who has to hustle endlessly just to matter. So you do. You become Lisa David Sam. You adopt a face, a list of problems, a calendar full of goals. You try to fix your life from the outside in. You panic when things fall apart because it feels like they're happening to you, as if you're a fragile thing being pushed around by a cruel world. But that you, the one constantly searching, fixing, struggling, that version, doesn't really exist in the way you think. You've tried to find the perfect mindset, the right practice, the right person, and maybe those things brought some relief temporarily. But then the restlessness came back, the dissatisfaction, that dull ache of not enoughness. It always circles back, doesn't it? That's because the issue was never out there. It wasn't your job, your relationship, your diet, your city. It was the belief that there's a separate you who has to get everything just right, in order to feel okay. That belief is the hypnosis, and until you see through it, you'll keep rearranging the dream, hoping it will finally feel real. Waking up doesn't mean your life suddenly becomes easy. It doesn't mean you stop feeling things, but it does mean you stop believing the story that says everything depends on you fixing it. You stop mistaking your reflection for your identity. It's like stepping back from the mirror. You still see the same world, the same faces, but the pull is gone. The craving is quieter. You're not trying to rearrange the glass anymore. You're starting to see through it. And what's on the other side? You, not the name, not the face, not the history or the plans. You as awareness, as the one watching the entire show without being trapped in it, as the calm behind the waves, the sky behind the weather. And here's the beautiful thing, that awareness never needed fixing. It was never broken. It doesn't care about your past. It's not scared of your thoughts. It just is. Clear, still free. You've been so used to identifying with the noise, the thoughts, the doubts, the wounds, that you forgot about the silence holding it all. You've been the ocean believing it's only the waves. But if you could even, for one quiet moment, look beyond the filters and see yourself without the story, without the mask, something would soften. The search would stop, not in defeat, but in deep understanding. Not because you gave up, but because you finally saw there was never anything missing. You don't have to chase peace. You are peace, covered in thoughts about what peace should look like. And when those thoughts begin to fade, even a little, everything changes. The world doesn't transform overnight. You still deal with bills, dishes, misunderstandings. But your relationship to those things shifts. You're not fighting your life anymore. You're not at war with the moment. You begin to live from something deeper, something that doesn't panic when plans change, something that doesn't tighten every time you're misunderstood, something that doesn't crumble under the weight of someone else's opinion. You stop thinking life has to be controlled in order to feel okay. And in that quiet, a deeper truth begins to rise. One that's always been there. One that doesn't need fixing, naming, or proving. That's when you begin to wake up. Most people ask, why is waking up so hard? Why does it feel so distant, so unreachable? And the answer is simple, even if it's uncomfortable. Because we've gotten used to being someone we're not. We've spent our entire lives identifying with a false center, with the voice in our heads, with the emotional weather that passes through us, with the body that moves and ages and aches. And once you've believed that story long enough, it begins to feel like the only home you've ever had. But that home is built on sand. And every time life shakes, it rattles the foundation. You try to hold it all together, your image, your roles, your expectations, but something inside knows this isn't real. This isn't steady. And that dissonance, that quiet unease, that's not a flaw, that's the invitation. It's the first sign that you're not who you think you are. You've forgotten that your thoughts are just weather systems passing through. They're not you. Your emotions aren't fixed truths. They rise, they fall. They never stay. But you're what notices them. You're the space they move through. And that space is never anxious. It's never insecure. It just is. When you live from the false self, you suffer. It's not personal. It's structural. Because the mind-made identity is always under threat. It needs comparison to feel real. It needs approval to feel safe. It needs control to feel calm. And when those things wobble as they always do, you start to feel like life is against you. Like you're falling behind. Like something is broken. But the truth is, nothing outside you is causing that discomfort. It's not your job. It's not your relationships. It's not your routine or your past. It's the belief in a separate self, one that's always trying to survive in a world it thinks is out to get it. That belief is the cause of the ache. And that self doesn't exist in the way you've been taught to believe. That's why it never quite feels secure. Because it's not real. It's a construct. When someone begins to wake up, you can feel the shift. They're not frantic anymore. They're not constantly reaching for the next solution. They stop trying to be the hero of every problem. They stop making themselves the main character in every story. Instead, they watch. They begin to notice thought patterns, as if they were watching clouds. They see emotions rise and fall without needing to cling or push them away. They don't shame themselves for feeling anger or jealousy or fear. They just let it pass. And that letting go isn't apathy, it's clarity. Because there's nothing left to protect. No pretend self left to defend. And in that space, they become softer, not weaker. Softer like water fluid, powerful, alive. They don't need to argue. They don't need to prove. They don't need to win every conversation. Because they're not trying to fix the story anymore. They've stepped outside of it. And slowly, something incredible begins to happen. The mind stops being the master. It returns to being a servant. A quiet one. You've probably lived most of your life with the mind always active. Planning, judging, comparing, trying to get ahead of life as if thinking enough could make it safer. But when awakening deepens, the mind begins to rest. Not because you forced it, but because there's nothing left to chase. That silence you've been craving. It's not the absence of thoughts. It's the absence of attachment to them. It's the spaciousness that arises when you're no longer lost in every narrative. And in that spaciousness, something ancient returns. Some call it the heart. Others call it presence. It doesn't matter what name you give it. You'll know it when it comes. It's the feeling of no longer striving. No longer contorting yourself to fit a version of life that was never meant for you. No longer being pulled in 10 directions trying to be enough. It's not dramatic. It's not even loud. It's a quiet falling inward, a softening, a remembering. This is what some people mean when they say the mind falls into the heart. It's not a technique. It's not something you can force with effort. It happens naturally, like an exhale, like a leaf letting go. Because when the illusion fades, when you stop believing in the false identity, the spinning of the mind begins to slow. And in that stillness, you find peace. Not a passive, dull kind of peace, but a clarity so alive, it doesn't need explanation. You begin to see that peace was never something to earn. It wasn't a reward for healing. It wasn't waiting on the other side of a to-do list. It was the ground you were standing on all along. You don't need to wait for your life to be cleaner or simpler. You don't need to have the perfect environment or the right mood. You don't need to find the ideal version of yourself before it begins. It begins now, right where you are, in the middle of your ordinary, messy human moment. And no, that doesn't mean your struggles don't matter. It means your struggles don't need to be resolved before you remember who you are. In fact, they point to the remembering, because discomfort is a doorway. Every feeling of tension, every restless ache, every unmet longing, it's a nudge. It's the signal that you've drifted into the illusion again, that you've started identifying with the false self again. And the moment you notice that, You're already halfway home. Let yourself be where you are, fully, without resisting, without chasing, without performing. Let this moment, just as it is, be enough. Because underneath whatever story you're carrying is a presence that doesn't flinch, a presence that was never confused, a presence that doesn't need anything from you. And the second you stop trying to become someone else, the second you stop reaching for the next fix, you begin to settle into that presence. At first, the change is quiet. A moment that would have triggered you now passes without chaos. A conversation that used to spiral doesn't grab you the same way. You find yourself less attached to being right. You stop needing to defend your point. You laugh more, not to dismiss anything, but because you know you're not in danger. That calm, that grounded stillness, it's not because the world got easier. It's because you stopped believing you were the one who had to hold it all together. When something heavy arises, you pause. You ask, who is this happening to? And the answer that comes isn't what it used to be. You realize it's not happening to you. It's happening within the body, within the mind. But you, the real you, are watching from a stillness untouched by the storm. That distance isn't disconnection. It's freedom. It's the space in which real peace grows. And that's when the shift begins to anchor itself, not just as a thought or idea, but as a lived experience. You begin to sense that no matter what the world throws at you, whether it's praise or criticism, gain or loss, something inside doesn't flinch anymore. You're not immune to life, but you're no longer trapped in it either. You see events rise and fall, and you respond. But it's not coming from panic. It's not coming from a desperate need to fix your image or control the outcome. You've stepped out of the role you once believed was yours. You're not trying to win life anymore. You're simply participating in it, present, whole, quietly alert. And in that stillness, you come to know something deeper, something unshakable. It's not something you learned in a book or gained through practice. It's something that was always there. It's like remembering a song you used to hum as a child. The moment you hear it again, you don't need anyone to explain it. You just know. That's what this awareness is like. You don't have to argue for it. You don't have to defend it. It's not a badge to wear. It's not even something you talk about. It's just a quiet fact, a knowing that moves beneath everything else. The body continues. The mind continues. Life goes on. But the weight is different now. You don't take things so personally. You don't collapse under the pressure of your past. You don't carry the same fear of what might happen tomorrow. There's a softness in how you live, even when things are hard, and others begin to feel it. Even if they don't understand what's changed in you, they notice. You don't react the same way. You don't escalate tension. You don't join the noise. You become a kind of mirror, not because you try to be, but because your presence doesn't reflect fear anymore. It reflects clarity. You're not striving to be enlightened. You're not building an identity around spirituality or philosophy. You're not declaring anything. You're simply being. And being doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need a spotlight. It just flows like water without announcing itself. And what's most beautiful is this: you didn't gain anything. You didn't earn some special prize. You didn't climb a ladder of self-worth. You just stopped pretending. You stopped believing the story that you were lacking. You stopped chasing what was already yours. That's the secret. You don't become enlightened. You realize you were never not. Every step on this so-called journey is actually a shedding, a loosening, a gentle unraveling of what was never real to begin with. You don't add truth to your life, you remove what's false. You don't reach for awareness, you stop gripping what was blocking it, and what's left? Just you. As you are. Not the story, not the image, not the endless performance, but the presence that's been behind every breath since the beginning. It's never been hidden, just overlooked. That's why waking up feels like remembering, not like learning. Because deep down, you already knew. You've always known. The problem is, we spend so much time trying to become someone better, smarter, more successful, more healed, that we miss what's right here. We get wrapped up in improving the mask, refining the role, curating the image. But the role was never meant to be who we are, and the longer you hold on to it, the heavier it gets. To wake up is to put it down. Not with resentment, not with shame, but with relief. You were never meant to carry that weight. You don't need to retreat to the mountains. You don't need to start over in a new city. You don't need to find a quieter place or a more peaceful community. Because wherever you go, you bring yourself with you. If you haven't made peace with who you think you are, the new surroundings won't make a difference. Peace doesn't come from the view outside your window. It comes from no longer needing to perform the role of you. You could be in the city or the countryside alone or surrounded by others, it doesn't matter. If you carry the belief that something's wrong with you, that belief will color every experience. If you gossip and argue in one place, you'll do the same in another. If you feel restless in this relationship, you'll feel restless in the next. The story follows you until you stop believing the one it's happening to. That's where real freedom begins. When you finally see that the person you think you are is just an idea, just a bundle of memories, reactions, preferences, you realize something profound. The peace you were chasing is already here. It's been whispering beneath every moment, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere. So stay, not just physically. Stay inwardly. Stay with what is. Don't run toward the next explanation, the next solution, the next identity. Let the noise play without joining it. Watch what arises. Watch what pulls at your attention. And little by little, something begins to shift. Not through effort, not through control, but through stillness. And in that stillness, something sacred rises. Not a feeling, not a belief, but a recognition, a coming home. You stop trying to fix everything. You stop trying to fix yourself. Not out of laziness or resignation, but out of understanding. Because you see clearly, there's nothing broken at your core. There never was. The calm that begins to grow in you isn't cold or disconnected. It's warm, grounded, kind. You no longer speak just to fill the space. You don't need to be understood to feel worthy. You don't argue for your limitations. You don't posture or shrink. You move from presence, not from performance. And that presence begins to shape everything. Your relationships change not because others changed, but because your grip softened. You no longer demand that people complete. You validate, you agree with you. You begin to let them be as they are. And in that allowance, they feel freer too. This isn't something you talk about. It's something you live. It doesn't show up in your resume or your timeline. It shows up in how you walk into a room, in how you listen, in how you breathe through moments that used to tighten your chest. You carry a silence with you, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of depth. And in that silence, others feel lighter, not because you gave them answers, but because your presence reminds them that there's something beyond the noise. You've stopped searching, not because you gave up, but because you finally realized what you were searching for was always you. There's no longer a desperate need to hold everything together because there's nothing false left to defend. That's what makes this peace so different from the temporary reliefs you used to chase. It's not held up by circumstance. It's not threatened by change. It simply is, because it's not something you built, it's what you uncovered. This is what matters most. Awakening isn't about gaining anything new. It's not some rare achievement handed down to a select few. You don't ascend into enlightenment. You dissolve into it. And even that isn't quite right, because you've never not been it. The whole path is just about seeing through what you're not. Stripping away the layers of identity, fear, striving, and illusion until all that's left is the quiet truth that was there the entire time. There's no grand finish line, no triumphant ceremony, just a gentle settling, a deep rest, a shift so subtle it might go unnoticed by the outside world. But for you, it changes everything. You stop performing a version of yourself. You stop defending an idea of who you think you're supposed to be. And in that space, there's no need for perfection, no need for control, no need for applause. You're simply rooted in what's real. And reality, when seen without filters, is so much kinder than you thought. So much simpler. So much more still. The things that used to pull you into spirals, being misunderstood, feeling behind, making a mistake, begin to lose their grip. Not because you've hardened, but because you've softened. Because you've stopped believing that any of it touches your essence. You are not the voice in your head. You are the silence listening. You are not the body or the mind. You are the space in which they come and go. And from that space, everything that once felt urgent starts to slow down. The pressure to prove, the fear of missing out, the ache to be validated, the craving for success. All of it softens, not because you've conquered it, but because you've stopped identifying with the one who needed it so badly. The more clearly you see that this separate you was never truly solid, the less power your old patterns have. You don't have to resist them. You just don't believe them anymore. And what's not believed eventually fades. Even the desire to be awake fades. Because when you realize that this has always been your nature, what is there left to chase? And yet, ironically, this is where life begins to unfold with a richness you couldn't have imagined before. Not because it becomes perfect, but because you're no longer demanding perfection from it. You let it be. And in that, allowing beauty returns. Ordinary moments begin to shimmer. Conversations deepen. Laughter comes easier. Stillness doesn't feel empty, it feels full. You stop reaching for meaning, like it's somewhere far away. You see that meaning has always been embedded in this breath, this gaze, this moment. And as that realization deepens, the most unexpected thing happens. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to shout that you've seen something profound. The truth doesn't need volume. It doesn't need marketing. It just quietly radiates, and people feel it. Not because you've become some spiritual authority, but because something in you no longer demands the spotlight. You've given up trying to be someone, and in doing so, you've become more yourself than ever. But here's the paradox. You can't chase this. You can't manufacture it. The moment you turn it into a goal, it slips through your fingers. Because goals belong to the story of becoming. And this isn't about becoming. It's about ending the performance. It's about finally telling the truth to yourself that you are already what you've been searching for. All the self-help books, all the practices, all the spiritual language, they can be useful pointers. But they're not the thing. They're signs, glimpses. And if you cling too tightly to the signs, you miss what they're pointing to. And what they're pointing to is something so quietly intimate it can't be captured in language. It's the you that exists before any name was spoken. The you that watched the whole story unfold without ever being the story itself. Even the label enlightenment starts to feel unnecessary. It's just another word, another idea. What you are doesn't need a name. It was here before all names. It will be here after. You don't need to dress it up. You don't need to try to look spiritual or talk in poetic riddles. You can be ordinary. You can be messy. You can still have preferences and flaws and moods. But underneath it all, you're no longer fooled. You don't believe the dream anymore. And because of that, you're finally free to live in it with gentleness, with humor, with love. You'll still feel. You'll still stumble. But even the pain feels different now. It doesn't define you. It moves through. And then it's gone. You're no longer building a better version of a character. You're resting in the awareness that holds all characters. And when someone asks you what changed, you may not have words. You may just smile. Not out of secrecy, but because some truths can only be felt. What you are can't be seen with the eyes. It can't be touched. It can't be broken. It's not your image. It's not your story. It's not your personality or history. It's this breath, this stillness, this moment. There's nowhere to get to, nothing more to become. No final insight to collect, just this being what you already are. And you might feel grief rise. Grief for the years you spent trying to become someone. Grief for how hard you tried to fix a self that was never broken. Let that grief come. Let it wash through. It's a part of the release. It means the story is ending, and something truer is beginning. You've always been here, watching, waiting, holding the space for your own return. And now, you've remembered. No trumpets, no fireworks, just a soft, unshakable knowing. You're already home, and you always were.